the Disaster Services Workforce Engagement Manager, who will be introducing the next person who will be speaking. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Heather, and good evening, everyone. So my name is Diana Damian. I'm the Disaster Regional Workforce Engagement Manager. And I would like to introduce our wonderful instructor and regional mental health lead, Mike Wirtz. I think some of you have seen him on camera just before. He's our regional mental health lead for the Pacific Island region, including Guam, Northern Mariana Island, and American Samoa. Mike is a retired licensed social worker that received his bachelor's at University of California in San Diego and his master's at UH Manoa. He's a disaster mental health volunteer manager and also an instructor with American Red Cross since 1995. Mike's disaster experience includes multiple national but also statewide deployments. Nationally, he served during Hurricane Marlene in the Virgin Islands and Hurricane Sandy in New York. He also managed the northeastern storm covering several states at the National Operations Center in Washington, D.C., and also went on special assignments in New York, 9/11 incidents, and also the Arizona Yornell Hill fire that killed 19 firefighters back in 2013. Statewide, he served on a variety of incidents, including helicopter and plane crashes, fires, tropical storms, floods, hostage situation, as well as, of course, the Hawaii volcano eruption. As I mentioned, Mike is also an instructor. He has taught many courses, including his favorite class, Psychological First Aid, to many Red Crossers, volunteers statewide and other Pacific Islands. He also taught Psychological First Aid and Resilience for families, friends, and neighbors to many organizations, including the Department of Health, Department of Education, State Hospital, Federal Prison, and other various nonprofit groups. So here I gave the mic to Mike. And I hope you did. Did I pass the test, Mike? What do you think?
I think you're great. I loved your voice. No matter, you could say anything and I feel great about it. Awesome. You guys, if you guys don't know Diana, oh, there's Paul Klink. Let's give her a big hand. Diana, you're the awesome. Let me do a reactions thing. Yeah, barking dogs and waving things. Thanks, Diana. I'm honored to be able to be in this meet and greet on this very special occasion, which is, of course, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. Let me see if I can start my slideshow. Is that the first thing I do? I think that's what I'm doing. Can you see my screen?
Yes, you can see.
Welcome to National Mental Health Awareness Month. I kind of studying this group. It's called the Mental. Let's see what it was called. Mental Health America are the ones that sponsor this monthly event. They've done it since 1949. So I dug in and I got a little history. So I thought I'd tell you a couple of quick stories. Back in 1909, this guy named Cliff Beers, who was Yale College educated and a Wall Street, financier, suffered major depressive. Actually, he was bipolar depression, and he really got depressed after he lost his brother, and he tried to kill himself. He jumped out of a 3-story apartment and crashed onto the sidewalk and survived. And then he ended up going to, of course, to the hospital. And then they ended up seeing that he was kind of weird, and he went through various institutions, and he was institutionalized for 3 years. During his experience in those institutions, he realized that he was being abused and he was taken advantage of, and he was not getting the services that he needed. At one point during his abuse, he actually spent 21 days in a straitjacket. So anyway, when he got out of that, he went ahead and decided, I don't want to do this. I don't want this to ever happen to anybody again. And he wrote a book, which you can look for his book. If you go into mentalhealthamerica.org or whatever their sign is, and learn a little more about the history of it. It was fascinating. Well, when he got out, he said, we got to clean this up. Mental health needs to get a redo. So they started this institution. They started this group called National Mental Health Association, which is now called Mental Health America. And since 1949, they've been sponsoring a monthly mental health awareness with their mission to improve attitudes, services, and prevention around the world of mental health. Now, this time of year, I was just noticing there's been so much mental health going around that the world has changed since 1909. If you saw the newspaper this morning, I was going to show. I lost my bud. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Mike.
Okay. Well. Now can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Helpful assistance.
All right. Anyway, I got short time here before introducing, so what I'll tell you is that I was saying that I was reading the newspaper this morning, and the front page was about mental health, and inside of it, of course, we talk about mental health concerns from pandemic. We hear about the Ukraine. We hear about mental health being mentioned constantly in the news by word of mouth all over the place. And that was not the way it was back in 1995 when I joined the American Red Cross. Oh, by the way, I was on my way to work and I ran into this car, and I have to show you that slide. For those of you that are mental health, it's amazing. I said, I wonder who this person is. I want to knock on the door and say, aloha and thank you. Anyway.
That's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
Very, very cool.
Okay, so anyway, in 1995, I joined the American Red Cross. I took when I took my disaster mental health class, it was taught by psychiatric nurses. And so I went back to look at the history, and what I learned was this. Everybody knows that Red Cross is represented by nurses. Nurses are the people that is the icon for Red Cross. And we know that nurses' stations were in all of the shelters. They're always out in the field and they're always doing their work. But if you can imagine nurses doing work and all that time, people coming up to nurses and saying to them, oh, can you talk to me? I'm really feeling sick. I'm depressed. I'm kind of feeling scared. I'm very anxious. Can you help me? That takes up a lot of nurses' time. They do the work because that's what they used to do. So many nurses and Dr. Geis, who's going to be the presenter, is one of those types that was able to do psychological first aid and provide mental health services under their hat. Well, anyway, in '95, they decided there's been so much need for mental health that they're going to go ahead and split the station mental health services and disaster health services. And you see them often sitting at the same table in a shelter side by side. Soon after that, transportation accidents like the plane crash that was in New York went under a charter under the Homeland Security Plan that Red Cross was going to respond to major transportation accidents. And now it's been expanded to responding to mass casualty events and pandemics. So the Red Cross mental health services have exploded since 1995 and have become a very present part of Red Cross recovery and service provision. So there's the history of disaster mental health. Now it's time for me to introduce my honorees. So I'm going to get off camera here. And I'm going to talk to you about Faye. Faye, could you come on and put your face up here so we can see you, if you're here? If not, that's okay. I wanted to share Faye Bailey with you. Dr. Bailey is a retired licensed clinical psychologist who received her PhD from Manoa. Hi, Faye. She retired from private practice and became a Red Cross volunteer in 2018. And she currently is in the position as a manager and the disaster mental health lead for the island of Kauai. She's also a disaster instructor and has helped teach psychological first aid. Her local experience started immediately after she joined the American Red Cross, and I met her on that first disaster together in Kauai when they had the major floods on the North Shore, where the roads were washed out and the communities were isolated, and all of that shelter issues were coming to fruit. And for some crazy reason, through all of that, she said, "Oh, I like this work." So then a month later, I joined her over in Volcano at the volcanic eruption on the Big Island, where many of our volunteers have contributed their work. Later that year, she also worked Hurricane Lane and Hurricane Olivia, which I actually wasn't around for, but I'm sure she did a great job. She's also worked locally over on the Dillingham airplane crash that was on Makalea. And how many people, you can come off mic, how many people were there? Do you remember how many were in that crash?
You know, sorry, I don't. I bet Maria does.
Yeah, okay, all right. Anyway, I think there's like 8 is the number that pops to my head. Then she's also worked on a Hawaii helicopter accident. And then she was put to the task during the last floods last year when she ended up saying, "Sure, I'll do this." And she joined as the Deputy Assistant Director for Recovery and worked as a manager and helped us work with all those folks and all those floods that happened island and statewide that time. Her national experience includes Hurricane Dorian, which was in Georgia, and then she also helped work the cases down in Florida. She was at the Cascade Fire in Oregon, which everybody probably knows about. And she worked Hurricane Ida in Louisiana, so she got a taste of the Deep South. But most recently, she's taken an interest in this shelter resident transition team as a program advocate. And she was in Mayfield this year, was it? Last year. This year. Last December. Mayfield, Kentucky, when the big tornado came through. Well, she's an active DAT member. She also worked the pandemic on Kauai, working with the Red Cross during their vaccination site, and then worked in parks where homeless population were temporarily sheltered. She's done quite a bit of work. So I've got to say, Dr. Bailey has committed a great deal of her life and personal development in her short 4-year career in the Red Cross. She's worked everywhere, shelters, headquarters, out in the field. She's taught psychological first aid classes. She's been on several national deployments. And this year she got promoted to manager. Yay, Faye. And she's also, one of the most important things that I think she's done is she's a committed and active member of a disaster team on Kauai, and has been consistently available and eager to stand up to traumatic crisis and disaster work. And we honor you today for your good work. Thank you so much, Faye. Next on the list is Ron Matayoshi, and I don't know if he'll be here. Is Ron here? If you are, can you come on camera? If not, I will read about you. Ron Matayoshi is a retired licensed social worker, and he used to work as the practicum director for the UH School of Social Work. You might remember his wife, Coralie Matayoshi. That's right, they're partners. Anyway, he was he was in the practicum department when I became a social worker. So he helped me to get my degree. But he joined the Red Cross in 2006, and his current position is a supervisor, but he's also a disaster mental health lead here on Oahu. He's also an instructor, and he's helped teach psych first aid. and he has a variety of Red Cross experience, both locally and nationally. Locally, he's already worked, I have on the record, 2 tropical storms, 4 hurricanes, volcano, Hawaii, and 3 different floods. And nationally, he worked on the Ozo landslide in Washington, where the big landslide took out a whole lot of homes. And that was a few years ago. And then he also worked in Texas for Hurricane Harvey. He's been so helpful to the Red Cross mission in so many ways over his 17 years of service, and he had given valuable experience in all types of disaster work. He gained lots of experience on the mainland, but I mostly remember his commitment to local work. He's been out on many DAT calls and responded to many statewide disasters, doing great shelter work and providing outstanding personal care, providing emotional support, and psychological first aid service to those in need. He demonstrates flexibility, and he's made himself available for all kinds of Red Cross business and is willing to respond with compassionate presence whenever he's been called to serve. I honor you, Mr. Ron Matayoshi. Next is Dr. Yvonne Yin, and I hope that she was going to come on tonight. Is she on? If you're on,
hi,
oh gosh.
I'm here in the car.
Hey, you guys, say hello to Dr. Yim. Congratulations. Tell us where you are and what just happened.
I'm in Arizona. I'm here for my doctoral hooding.
So she just became a doctor and she got to have a hoodie. Congratulations, Yvonne.
Thank you.
So she's a licensed clinical social worker who recently got her PhD. In fact, she just went through the hooding ceremony today, which we told you about. She's the director of behavioral health at Kalihi Palama Health Center. And she joined the Red Cross in 2006. And she's also does a lot of work with recovery services and casework. And that's where I first met her, really. Nationally, she did get a chance to go out to Hurricane Irma, where she worked alongside disaster health services, providing counseling in remote areas from Orlando to Daytona. And clients included single families, school-aged kids, and the elderly. She locally has worked at Volcano, at the Pahoa shelter, working with, individuals who lost their homes. She's worked Hurricanes Olivia and Douglas. And during my work with her on Hurricane Douglas, she was a great team player, making wellness calls and check-ins with disaster workers that worked at the shelters to check in with them and see how they're doing. She also worked the hibiscus fire at Diamond Head. If you remember that, that's that street that the guy shot these people and lit the houses on fire. She's provided assistance to those families that were impacted. And she did some work with the Dillingham Airfield plane crash as well, working alongside spiritual care to provide grief counseling to families whose loved ones died in a plane accident. She's always been an approachable, easygoing, and competent volunteer that has been helpful to both disaster mental health and recovery services. When I first met her, she was helping casework complete and close post-disaster open cases in the office, up at the office. She's become an expert on our DMH team regarding local culture, since she exudes compassion in her work with marginalized populations, such as the elderly, children, Native Hawaiians, and military. So she's our local guru expert with that. And she's been greatly appreciated for the contributions that she's made to the Red Cross mission. So Yvonne, we honor you. Thank you so much for your good work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Okay, next one is Sally. Is Sally on? Please bring on your screen if you're on. If not, we'll carry on. Nancy Sully, I'm sorry I called her Sally. Nancy Sully is a marriage and family therapist in private practice on the Big Island. She joined the Red Cross in California 20 years ago as a volunteer, And she was actually working on training and CPR and the kind of health services side. But when she moved to the islands, she joined Hawaii State Chapter. She got herself her MFT license, and she's currently the supervisor and disaster mental health lead on the Big Island, where she's also a disaster instructor. Her service in Hawaii has been focused on her local community, so she's local based. She's extensive experience doing DAT calls and shelter operations, providing emotional support to clients, staff, and the community at large. Nancy has responded to at least 11 large-scale incidents on the Big Island. That includes 3 tropical storms, 5 hurricanes, 2 floods, and a volcano in a pear tree. No, a volcanic eruption. She happens to be on a very active and dynamic island, which statistically leads the nation in numbers of natural occurrences and disasters. I believe that it's due to the fact that there's constant seismic earthquakes going on the Big Island, but they are also taking the brunt of a lot of the storms that come through here. So it's a very dynamic island, which requires a lot of Red Cross work. Red Cross wouldn't be the same without Nancy. Over the past 15 years I have known her, she has led her team to provide disaster mental health services, especially in large incidents. Even though she's still employed with her private practice, she's consistently made herself available to respond to ongoing DAT calls island-wide. On a personal level, I am really grateful to have her on our team, and I can rely on her to respond to the mental health needs of her community. So Nancy, if you're out there, mahalos, we honor you. All right. Now, Leslie's my last volunteer before I pass this on to Becky, but she's going to get introduced soon. So what I'm going to share with you is minimal. She's a psychiatric and medical doctor from New York, and she joined the Red Cross in 2004. And she's our disaster mental health lead on Maui. Okay, and she's done a lot of work on Molokai and Maui and Lanai and training. I have 3 tropical storms, 6 hurricanes, 1 flood, and many DAT calls. What's most important for me to share with you is that Leslie has been a constant and reliable source to the resource to the Maui branch. Always available in times of disaster to support the mission, has provided countless hours of counseling support and community education through psychological first aid. Maui Disaster Mental Health Services would not be the same without her leadership and support. And Leslie, you can bring yourself on camera if you like, because I'd love to honor you. I know you're here. Leslie, you're the best. Thank you so much. We honor you. And with that, I'm ready to pass on to Becky.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, Becky. You're in the dark.
How are you?
I'm good. All right, go ahead.
Super. I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to, since no one wants to look at me while I'm talking, I'm going to share just our little SAF resiliency slide that we have. Because I want to thank all of our mental health professionals. Your work is so important. It always has been, but in these times that we're living in, it's even more important, and it's just really relevant in the stress that we are all facing as a region, as a person, as a region, and as a country together. So thank you all. I want to share a little bit about our Service to the Armed Forces Resiliency Program, because not a lot of folks know about it, and that our mental health professionals are out there working with our military community, and that we offer resiliency programs that aim to build resilience, manage stress, and ease symptoms related to trauma for members of the armed forces, veterans, and their families. So we have 3 distinct program areas that are available through our resiliency program that offer short and supportive sessions that aims to teach coping skills through easy to use exercises. The program is different a little bit in their content and their teaching methods. So we have our coping with deployments, which is known to you all folks probably more well known as psychological first aid. So it is our military version of the psychological first aid. And really it's just dealing with separation and what that means for families as they go through their military career and on into veteran status. It can be done in small or large group sessions. And again, it teaches participants how to improve their psychological resilience and support through those psychological first aid actions. In our Reconnection workshops, again, utilize small group discussions and interactive activities to help participants connect with group members and better understand how they can reconnect with themselves, their families, their peers, and their communities throughout their military career. And there's different topics in our Reconnection workshops that are available, and they range from effective communication, stress solutions, trauma talk, emotional grit, which also includes a section on suicide, connecting with kids, diffusing anger, and caregivers of wounded, ill, and injured service members and veterans. We also have children's modules that are broken down into age groups from 5 to 8, 8 to 12, and 12 to 18 that cover communication skills and coping mechanisms. So then our third kind of area are our mind-body workshops. And as we have entered into this COVID age and we had to transition to virtual workshops, our team at National Headquarters developed a really kind of a hybrid between our Reconnection workshops and our mind-body workshops. Because our mind-body workshops utilize, again, the small groups with hands-on practice of stress-reducing exercises that aim to help participants to learn about the mind-body connection, gain self-insight, and improve personal wellness. So those are experiential in nature. And as we moved into the virtual space, they've kind of morphed into what we can deliver through our virtual workshops, our stress solutions, which have been very popular, effective communication, connecting with kids, the caregivers, and then also a new topic, creating calmness in stressful times, which is basically what it says. We're trying to manage stress and develop some relaxation techniques. Some additional modules that have been very popular that we haven't had necessarily in our region, but have been popular in other regions are our Family Laugh and Learns and Calm, which are designed for youth and their family and their parents. And then a Calm and Connected, which are designed for teens to be able to chat and discuss ages 13 to 17. So I want to thank our resiliency facilitators, Ryan Yamane and Mark Collins, who both couldn't be here tonight, both had other prior obligations, but have really helped us, especially in moving into the virtual realm with delivering our workshops. We've been struggling a lot through this time to figure out ways to get these workshops out in front of more folks. And Ryan was essential in helping us with partner presentations with only our partners, and as well as participants who might be interested. And then Mark Collins has really led us in those stress solutions workshops that we've been delivering, as well as our caregivers. So I want to, let me unshare that screen now. So I just really want to give a shout out to both of those. Both of our facilitators have been active this year. And we're very excited that next week two more facilitators will be getting trained in service to the armed forces. They have to go through a rigorous 3-day training experience that's led by our division resiliency team. So we will have, after next week, 2 additional facilitators that we hope to be able to deliver our resiliency programs to our military community more widely and more often. So thank you all, and thanks to especially to Ryan and Mark, who couldn't be here. And I'll throw it back to you, Mike.
I think it's back to Deanna. Deanna gets to do this.
Hi, so if Heather doesn't have anything to mention at this time, yes, it's back to me.
Yes. Take it away.
Take it away.
Great. So congratulations, everyone. Amazing commitment, the stories. You can tell how much support we have on American Red Cross and longevity as well. So that's a good sign. So thank you and mahalos to everyone. And I would like to continue, and I would like to announce the next speaker, Leslie as well. I think Mike started introducing her and recognized her as well. Leslie Hartley, guys. She's the star mental health lead in Maui, among other roles that she's holding as well as a community education presenter, disaster assessment team member. She's a training instructor as well as a disaster action team member. Leslie, she's a retired medical doctor and psychiatrist, originally from New York City, and she moved to Maui with her husband 28 years ago in 1995. Leslie is a clinical professor of psychiatry at John A. Burns School of Medicine at the University of Hawaii. She got involved with disaster psychiatry after September 11th, 2001, and became a Red Cross mental health volunteer in 2004. And has been a Maui mental health lead for the past 17 years. She's a member of many other disaster preparedness and response organizations and participates with them in training, drills, responses, or as a community educator. Leslie volunteers many hours with American Red Cross and advocates for mental health professionals to become Red Cross mental health volunteers. Leslie's hobbies are tennis, traveling and reading, visiting her daughter and son-in-law, and especially her grandchildren in Brooklyn, New York. All right, so Leslie, thank you very much. And I think you have the mic. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm trying
Yeah.
to open my share tray. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we see it, Leslie.
Okay, well, thank you. But before I start, I want to recognize two people who are not here, who were mentioned already. Nancy Saleh on the Big Island is incredible. And when the State Psychiatric Society went over for the volcano, she, with her bad back, she drove across the island 2 times and met with us, and she was really an active participant. The other one is Ryan Yamami, who I don't know personally, but he's unbelievable because he's in our legislature, and he's been a big friend to the State Psychiatric Society. So even though they're not here, I had to recognize them. So when a disaster happens, it feels like the sky is falling. And in my 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about disaster mental health, tell you a little bit about my story, and psychological first aid. So mental health is one of the 2 things which routinely go down in disasters. The other is communication, which includes the science of risk communication and messaging, as well as communication between individuals and organizations. And disaster mental health and communication are related, and more about that later. Disasters are increasing, both in frequency and severity, and the COVID-19 pandemic has increased the need for mental health services, both for healthcare workers and for the general population. So data have shown that for every death, 9 close relatives of that person are affected, and that's called the bereavement multiplier. Since we have just now hit 1 million deaths, there are at least 9 million Americans who may need grief counseling. Red Cross Disaster Mental Health provides emotional and psychological support to clients, staff, and the community by providing psychological first aid, guidance, self-help, education, and disaster mental health volunteers help others deal with stress, grief, loss, and challenging emotions of all kinds, including disasters of everyday life, as well as federally declared disasters. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, disaster mental health has added virtual formats to assist families, and an integrated care and condolence team, a team of helpers to assist in recovery, including spiritual care providers and funeral homes, and providing practical health is also part of psychological first aid. Unfortunately, we're still trying to combat the stigma about mental health. Psychiatrists in general, make diagnoses and prescribe medications, but that is not what we do in disaster mental health. We try to use plain language without jargon like PTSD or trauma, and these terms are loosely thrown around. We talk about stress, which is more accurate, and educate people about normal reactions, which typically get better within 1 month of a disaster event. And I can't emphasize enough that during this stressful time in the world and with COVID, we have to take care of our own mental health. Self-care. We all know what calms and relaxes us, and we just have to make time every day to take care of ourselves. So 2, my story. My father was an orthopedic surgeon who was never without a first aid kit. He started teaching me first aid at the beginning of grade school, like putting pressure on a wound to stop bleeding. Sadly, we are still now teaching bystanders, quote, stop the bleed for violence events. In 1968, my father and mother were in a small plane which crashed in Kenya. My father sewed up the facial lacerations of the pilot and my cousin, who were the 2 other people on the plane. Then my father wrote the first easily readable book on first aid. And after my father's premature death of cancer, we had a memorial lecture, a course teaching medical students, and that actually became a national standard. Medical students would say that they knew what to do in the emergency room, but if their buddy fell off his motorcycle, they didn't know what to do. I'm originally from New York City, and I got involved with disaster mental health after September 11th. My daughter and her family are in Brooklyn, and just 48 hours before the terrorist attack, I was on Flight 77, returning from Washington, D.C. to Maui, the very flight which crashed into the Pentagon. My daughter had just graduated from law school and was working in a law firm right about there, right next to the World Trade Center. She sent me an email, which I got several days later because all communications were down, saying that from the window of her office, she had seen a small plane crash into the South Tower and that it was definitely not an accident. It was several hours after the event that I found out what happened, and for the first hour, I didn't know if my daughter was dead or alive. And I don't know this area well, and I was looking at a picture like this and trying to see what buildings they thought were going to fall down. I joined a lot of disaster preparedness and response organizations. I deployed to Katrina in 2005 and to the lava disaster on the Big Island in 2018. And I learned the importance of culture in disaster response. In Louisiana, they gave us cultural training for a whole day, and I heard stories of rescue, the same story over and over again. They were on the roof for a few days. They saw dead bodies in the water. Finally, a cousin came with a boat and saved them. And on the Big Island, folks worshipped Madame Pele and gave her offerings, ho'okupu, and saw her as cleansing the land which the people had neglected. Lava, hula, and ho'okupu. But here on Maui, I saw the day-to-day, boots on the ground. It was the Red Cross which was responding. And I have been Maui mental health lead for the Red Cross for many years. When the National Guard asked the Red Cross to help give COVID vaccines in Maui senior housing, along with other Red Cross volunteers, I volunteered. The elders were absolutely overjoyed to get vaccinated. As a disaster mental health volunteer, I respond to calls from Red Cross case managers and shelter managers about individuals who are showing concerning behavior. And I go to local shelters like this one after Hurricane Lane in 2018. I was blessed with the opportunity to teach psychological first aid live in Maui County for 10 years. The effect of local culture was striking when I taught in Hana and on Molokai. The course was taught on Saturday mornings from 8 to 12. But folks told me that no one in Hana would be there at 8 a.m. So I told them to come at 7, and we were there. And they came with their whole families, kids, blankets, food, toys, and camped out for the whole day. They just giggled through the role plays, but actually they really do a great job responding. They're all part of one family. On Molokai, we had a huge turnout, and I knew a lot of the people because I worked there, but many folks are related with complicated relationships, which was awkward. But overall, teaching psychological first aid was extremely rewarding, especially to connect with a diverse audience, which included police, fire, clergy, along with ordinary citizens, and all of them wanted to do so much to help those in need. The course made them feel empowered by learning the limits of what one can do in a disaster, and they were grateful and thanked me, and I felt energized and inspired. Disaster mental health is delivered through psychological first aid. Psych first aid is like CPR for mental health. Both lay people and professionals can do it, and it's designed to do 3 things: detect signs of stress, provide support, and make referrals when needed. Psych first aid is not rocket science. Most of us know this stuff already, but training reinforces what we already know. Psych first aid could be used for disasters, large and small, and since the COVID-19 pandemic, I have been doing it on myself all day long, every day. Self-care. There are several versions of Psych first aid, but they're all basically the same. There are 2 apps, both of which I have and recommend. And if you go to the App Store and search psychological first aid, they come up. The one from the VA is green, and the one from the federal government, SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, is rust-colored. Different versions of Psych First Aid divided into 5, 8, or 12 core actions, but most people conceptualize Psych First Aid as consisting of 5 core actions. First, safety. Safety, like moving someone away from the direct line of sight of their house, which is burning down, but also communication and providing information can also make people feel safe. 2, calming, like the Tissue and Water Brigade, outreach by what we call, quote, walking around therapy, and teaching simple relaxation exercises like slow, deep breathing. Communicating information and educating people about normal reactions is also common. When people have acute stress reactions, they often feel like they're going crazy, and they're calmed by getting information and education about normal reactions. Third, efficacy, self and community efficacy. We know how to help ourselves, and communities know how to strengthen and heal themselves. Psych First Aid helps us help ourselves and our communities. Examples include self-care, wellness, deep breathing, mindfulness, yoga, community activities such as organizing a choir or memorial, and religion and spirituality play an absolutely prominent role in disasters, and these activities promote both self and community efficacy. Fourth, connectedness. Connecting with friends and relatives helps us cope. Most of us want to be able to take care of ourselves and be self-sufficient. So it's often hard for us to ask for help. But as responders, we can turn this around and ask survivors, if this happened to them, would you want them to call you? And fifth, hope and optimism. Examples include promoting activities which restore normalcy, like routines in school. Also encouraging community leaders to be role models of good coping. One can be in despair. If one sees light at the end of the tunnel, there is hope and optimism. Recovery involves accepting changes in one's life and making meaning in life. In conclusion, disaster mental health is an important part of disaster preparedness and response. First aid and psychological first aid can be taught to lay people, including children, as well as to Red Cross staff, mental health professionals, and to ourselves. Personally, I've been enriched and empowered by the enthusiastic and positive response I got from teaching psychological first aid and by responding when I've been called. Helping others makes you feel good. And I'm grateful to the Red Cross for giving me these opportunities. So please feel free to contact me if you have questions or want more information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. That was such a wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing your stories and your experiences. Thank you also to Mike for spearheading tonight's program, and to all of the disaster mental health volunteers for their commitment and for just providing such a valuable service to others, especially in times of disaster. I'm going to open it up now to folks who may have questions for either Leslie or Mike. Oh, I see a hand raised for Faye. If you want to just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
It's not a question. I just would like to butt in here for just a minute and give a shout out to Mike. I think I speak for all the DMH folks in thanking you and honoring you for being our fearless leader. You've done an amazing job throughout the whole pandemic of keeping us connected. And I think our monthly groups are actually a model, a national model. It includes all the IDC leads as well. And so congratulations to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Faye. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Leslie. This is Laura Lee on Maui. I'm so glad to see you representing us so well. And I want to say you've been a great source of support and a real wealth of knowledge that you bring to the Red Cross.
Thank you, Laura Lee.
Are we online?
Yes, we are.
Oh,
Does someone have a
yeah.
question? Oh,
Yeah. I had a comment and a question. This is Dan Kogar, a volunteer out here at the Guam chapter. First of all, thank all of you. I really enjoyed your presentation. You know, I'm an opportunist in the sense that I do all the online training that's available. And I have noticed, especially over the last year, that when you take a lot of the courses on EDGE, on Percipio, on IFRC, and another one I recently got into was on WHO, the World Health Organization. A lot of the classes that deal with disaster and volunteers interacting with the victims per se, they're adding in a lot of this psychological training into those courses so that people know how to deal with folks that have been through hardships. They have a lot of anxiety and stress. And one of my questions was, do you see them continuing this? Not to even mention the pandemic, where that almost all of the classes that you take with interacting with people and dealing with different types of personalities and stuff, that do you see them including a lot more of this psychological related training in those courses?
Okay, this is Mike. You know, that's a great question. I think the answer is yes, because I think we're moving in that direction. I think that the group of us, the IDC group, Health Services, Mental Health, and Spiritual Care group, has been they was brought up as an auxiliary service to provide auxiliary help during times of disaster. And for example, Daniel, you know, when we start a DRO, we're not the first ones that get called. They actually start everything in operations and then they bring us in. So we're in conversation with National to have them realize that we actually need to be the first call so that we can be there to support everybody as they get started. So I do think that you're gonna start to see a little bit of that kind of movement, because as I started in the beginning, the stigma of mental health is kind of going away because we're all realizing that we all need it. We're no longer isolated. We don't say, oh, those are the crazy people. It's now kind of normalizing it because all of us go through emotions. We all have reactions. And as Leslie pointed out, it includes good communication. So I don't know who's ringing the bell. I think it's you, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, so the answer is yes. So that's my answer. Okay.
Okay. And then the last comment I had here, and this is kind of unique to Guam, and I'm not sure how it is in other areas, but we have a very active Guam mental health program here on the island, both on the federal side and on the private sectors. And we have a lot of clinics that offer all these different services and stuff. But I was reading an article last week, and this is related to stress in the families and suicides. And they said one trend that has happened since the pandemic is they're seeing a higher number of suicides in the lower age group, 12 to 13, vice 16.
Mm-hmm.
Is this pretty much the same in Hawaii or?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. It's kind of a national thing.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah.
Yes,
Maybe
we are.
Leslie
We are.
Leslie
We are
address,
seeing. We are seeing more suicides, more overdose deaths. There's a lot of things that contribute to it. Our dysfunctional healthcare system, where people don't have access, disadvantaged people, stigma in different communities, the stress of COVID, the isolation. In terms of children, some of them do better when they don't have to deal with social issues. But my phone is going off, but we got rid of that. Then during the past 2 years, they're losing all the experiences of life that give them social skills. So they really set back a couple of years, not just from the content of school, but in their emotional development. So a lot of factors contribute to that. And there's drug use over the years is going down and down and down to younger people and to girls as well as boys. It used to be really just boys and men. And now in the lower age groups, the rates of substance problems in girls and boys is the same. And when that's combined with mental illness, it's a recipe for disaster. In terms of the courses, I have a quick comment, which is I went to the American Psychiatric Association a disaster mental health course for 20 years, and I thought it was boring. And I sat and I knit baby sweaters. But then when I deployed to Katrina, somewhere that stuff was all in the back of my brain, and it was like, oh, that's what they were talking about. So I found in the end, boots on the ground, being in one of the most stressful situations. It was 2 weeks after the storm. I went with the federal government, and I worked mostly in a Red Cross shelter. It all came together, and it was back there somewhere and helped me cope.
Okay, thank you. We do have some questions. Actually, let me just go to the person who has his hand raised right now. William, if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
First, thank you so much, everybody. The stories that you guys have is so amazing. And my question is actually, my wife is a medical health, mental health practitioner, and she is trying to be involved with a volunteering group. What exactly she needs to do to be part of the the team?
I think that's a Deanna question, is it? Or is it me? Just go to redcross.org and say, I'm interested in volunteering. Tell them that you are, is she a licensed mental health professional?
Well, we are from Ecuador, so she's licensed there. But here in the States, she will be having her license soon.
Okay. So to be a part of the mental health team, she'll need to have a license in good standing. It can be from any state. It can be from any territory. But you can understand the Red Cross wants to make sure liability-wise that we're covered. But other than that, she just goes down to the Red Cross office and jumps in and says, I want to volunteer. And she can still do that and do shelter work while she's getting her license organized and be helpful sharing by doing her psychological first aid. So we're all for it. We'll encourage her to get on. Absolutely.
Perfect.
She may
Thank
be
you so
able to
much.
help with the disaster action team that might help her with some of the things she's preparing for in her career.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Jill, I saw your question that you asked earlier about your licensure in social work. So we'll connect you after to Mike, and he can maybe help you offline. There are a few other questions I wanted to get to since we're getting close to the end of time. One of the questions is, it seems that the need for mental health professionals is growing exponentially. How can we interest more young people to consider this as a career?
Well, you talk to their parents can ask them. They could talk to their friends. That's a good question. How can we encourage younger people to get involved in mental health? What do you think, Leslie?
I think when celebrities share their stories about mental health, that it gets people more interested in it and reduces the stigma. And certainly NAMI, which is the major advocacy for mental illness, has these posters of all these famous people forever who had serious mental health problems. So I think getting high profile people to share their stories, and athletes increasingly are talking about mental health and their athletic performance, I think that helps.
Yeah, those are good ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one last question before we end. It's from Mahi, and I'm not sure. It says, her question is, what are some things we can do to help our young people to gain some of those experiences today? So Mahi, I'm not sure, what experiences are you referring to?
Well, since during COVID, as Leslie's saying, that they kind of robbed of interaction with other people and with their peers. I was just wondering if we are involved, or as we see nieces and nephews, what are some ways that we could maybe help them to compensate for that loss?
Okay, but one thing I could add is that the Mental Health Association, which was mentioned here, has a class. Before I went to the Big Island, we heard that there was a lot of problem in the schools with bullying and depression and suicide. So I mostly took care of adults. So I took this course on youth suicide and bullying prevention, YSBP. It was 2 full days. And there were a variety of people there, school counselors, and it was absolutely amazing. It was very interactive. The videos were incredible. And this trauma-informed care in schools is mostly taught to teachers to detect signs of stress in kids. But kids, middle school kids talk to kids. So this program is delivered to kids in one class period, ideally on 2 successive days. And it teaches them how to respond when somebody they think might be depressed or risk of suicide or bullying. So I think that's an amazing program. It's in the schools. They have trainers on every island in our state. And I think it could be utilized more.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you especially, of course, to Mike and to Leslie for tonight's program. And we will close out tonight. Just a reminder that we will be logging in your volunteer hours for attending tonight's session, so you don't need to do that. And we hope you can join us at our next one next month. So I'll have a good night.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Everyone, good
All
night.
right, thanks everyone. Good night.